on this computer, recording process. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I don't know if there is any of you joining for this live interview. Apologies for being a little bit late. The interview will be in the Facebook group, so you can watch it also later. And I want to give thanks and greet our host for today, Jolie. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I would like to have a couple of minutes practice so we can land in our bodies and perhaps leave a bit behind the morning and other things we have been doing so we can all dive together. So I'm going to invite us all just to take a moment to establish contact between the ground and our feet. Between the sitting bone and the chair. And just having a sense of feeling the ground meeting the feet, the chair, the sofa or the cushion where you're sitting, meeting your sitting bones, just sensing that point of contact. And allowing your body, if you wish, to be received and to open up a little bit to receiving this support through these surfaces. And I invite us all just to sense where there is a feel of ease or warmth or comfort or spaciousness in the body. And just tuning in with that. And inviting in a little bit more comfort. Welcoming maybe a little movement or stretch. And coming back in a moment to the space together. Inviting our hearts in the space. Thank you. And I would like to read a couple of words from a book. It is a collection of poetry and prayers by Marianne Williamson. And since I had the impression, even if I don't know you, Jolie, very well, that you're very passionate about your work and what you do, this morning I just opened the book. I opened it a little bit like a tarot, nearly. And this really resonated. So before I pass the baton to you, I would like to read this. The meaning of work, whatever its form, it's that it be used to heal the world. The essence of a business is the vision behind it. An illumined vision is service to humanity. Love is the most powerful fuel in any endeavor. The most important question to ask about any work is, how does this serve to the world? To whatever extent it contributes healing of some form of society, to that extent this project is blessed. Blessing means mystical support and protection. If you want your business to succeed, pray that it serves mankind.
Mm. Oh, that's lovely.
So I pass the baton to you to share a little bit about yourself, about your work and your art, and welcome again today.
Thank you so much. So I want to share a kind of crux moment in my life that was a key pivotal moment, and then that led to all the work that I then have created, and we can talk more about that after. But I want to just share the moment where things really shifted for me, because I'd had a dream of being an actress and working in theatre and being an artist and writing books and many ideas of what that would look like. And I assumed that by the time I was 29, I was going to be famous. That was just a given. I believed it. And I got to 29 and I wasn't. And I was like, oh, okay. I have to come up with something else. And I met someone and we got married, and then we started trying for children. And then that didn't happen. And I was like, okay, this is plan B. This was plan B. And at 35, I was working in a call center, and I had to say the same script over and over again every day. I was there for 2 years, and I planned my death all day long, every day. I was just, I felt like I had failed 100%. And I thought that if I died, that at least there was some possibility that something better might have happened. And that was all I could think about. And the only reason why I didn't do it was because my mum has been an incredible mother, and I know how precious that is. You know, it's a shock growing up realizing that that wasn't normal, that it was actually a real gift to have a mother that was wonderful. And I couldn't do that to her. And so that was the thing that stopped me. And there was a moment when we did the last round of IVF and it didn't work, that I saw my whole reality just completely crumble. It was like the names of the children that I'd created, the dream of the life that we would have, how I was going to bring them up, being a grandmother, being a great grandmother. You know, it's a reality that forever doesn't exist. You know, it doesn't just stop and then that's it. As I get older, it's layer upon layer of that not existing. And I had to let all of it go. And in doing that, it was the Fool in the tarot. And I realized in hindsight that the Fool is stepping off the cliff into the unknown. And I had that as a practice. I'd been doing a theatre practice called Fooling, and it's a very unknown practice, but it's actually deeply, deeply spiritual. And it's unfolded for me as I've gone through this journey, and it will continue till the day I die, unfolding the journey of the Fool. And you step off this cliff into the unknown, and the more we know, the bigger the circumference of the unknown. You know, we think we've got this insatiable appetite to know and to have control. We're hurling through space on a lump of rock. We have absolutely no control. Anything that you are, you know, anything you paint on your blank slate, your easel, you're choosing to, and you can paint whatever you want on there, because it's literally whatever gets you through the night. We're hurling through space on a lump of rock. If it makes you feel good, brilliant, because you can do whatever you want. You can create whatever you want. It's crazy that we're here. It's a miracle. And so this moment where I stepped off the cliff, I was like, okay, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm out of ideas. Plan A hasn't happened. Plan B hasn't happened. Plan C is kill myself. I'm not going to do that. Plan D, universe, you're in charge. And I gave myself to the universe, and I stepped off that cliff and I stopped knowing. And from that moment on, my life has been incredible. It's just been an absolute transformation. And I realized that this idea we have of what we want is an image that we hang in front of our face, and we spend the whole time chasing this image, and behind it is heaven. Like absolute paradise is behind this postcard, and we can't see it, and we're ignoring it because we've got this idea in our head, and it's just a fantasy. And the second I took that fantasy and I ripped it up and I threw it away and just stepped into what is, everything changed for me. So that's
Thank
the thing.
you.
That's the thing I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I want to acknowledge what you said, particularly about going through this time of your life when you were feeling suicidal and you were thinking about taking your life. And I feel that this is very poignant, particularly for the strangeness of the times that we are living, when so many people are really struggling with their mental health, with loneliness, with depression, with anxiety. And I'm so grateful that you're here today to actually share this story. And there is some gravitas in what you're saying, because actually you moved through that threshold and managed to live. And you also spoke about the unknown, which I feel it is something that, particularly when we enter midlife, it is an aspect of that transformation. It is a component of the turmoil of preparing for a new life cycle, which is making peace actually with not knowing. And perhaps, as you said, stop following those images or ideas that were put on our head and in our lives and maybe didn't belong fully to our being. So thank you for sharing all of that. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your journey and what else happened, because we chatted a little bit before, and I know that you embarked on this incredible journey of becoming a pilgrimage, and how that unfolded for you.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the cliff is way up there and there are these strings of control, and every time I find one, I cut it and I fall back further and further into the arms of the universe, and it gets more and more magical. And the initial 7 years after that initial stepping off the cliff, worked in theatre, had books published, like all these things happened that I dreamt of happening, and they looked nothing like how I'd imagined they were going to look at all, but they happened. And I then found myself with the lockdown, and when we went into the pandemic, no longer able to work in theatre. All the theatres were shut. But I also felt like I was sick of the old paradigm anyway. You know, we all knew it wasn't working, and it was like, oh, pandemic, whoops. But actually, we all knew that something needed to shift anyway. And I just took it as the opportunity to really step into what I cared about, which was nature and Mother Earth. And I just wanted to be out in her as much as possible. And it became almost like a mistress, like a love affair, where I was so passionate about this. Like, you know, I couldn't talk to someone without noticing a butterfly flying past them, or, you know, it was like there was someone that you're in love with just in the corner of your eye, and you couldn't ignore them. And the more I immersed myself, the better I felt in myself, the more happy and whole I felt. And so when we came out of the first lockdown, I'd lost a few friends during the lockdown who died in not to do with COVID, but just from really horrible circumstances. And so I was in a lot of grief, and I'd felt like I was in a prison, and I really needed to walk. And so I'd looked for a long walk to do, and I found one that was over a month long, that was called the St. Michael Way. And that was from Land's End in Cornwall to the Norfolk coast. So it was the widest you can walk across the UK.
Wow.
So it's kind of slightly diagonal across the widest bit. And it was 500 miles.
Wow.
And it's going to be 7 weeks. And I set off, and my whole life changed in that period. I'd lived in Brighton for 20 years, worked in theatre for, you know, since 7 or 8 years, and was married for 13 years. And then by the time I finished, I no longer lived in Brighton. I was no longer married. I no longer really worked in theatre. I led pilgrimages. And I now live on a tiny little island called Sark in the Channel Islands. There's no cars or street lights. I'm literally just immersed in nature 24 hours a day. And I have a new partner, and it's no, the toxicity that was there in my last relationship isn't there, and it's beautiful, and I'm really happy. And now I take people out on pilgrimages, and I love sharing this magic that comes from the meditative state of walking, of being with the land, and we call it listening to the land. Learning to listen, because indigenous cultures have been in a two-way conversation with the land forever, and we forgot, and we still have it. You know, there's still that oak tree that you climbed when you were a child that was precious to you. You still have the places. It's called kin and kith. So your kin are your family, and your kith is your land, your special land. And we have that. We have the kith still in us, but it's probably from childhood. You know, it's somewhere that you played as a child. But it's remembering that, rekindling that, and regrowing that. That's what I'm about now. That's what my work's about.
Yeah, thank you. It's really, it's just really amazing to see you so, you know, full of life and energy and passion and enthusiasm, particularly after you shared what you faced in your life. These are real struggles you spoke about. And I got also curious when you spoke about the first pilgrimage. Could you share a little bit more how it was for you to do it as a woman? I imagine that you were alone, if I don't remember well, and the practicalities, maybe on sleeping outdoors at night and all of that, because I can imagine that this can also awaken other archetypes and the encounter with strangers and the dark and solitude and all of it.
Magic process, because pilgrimage, you have to trust the universe and the unknown. I talked with the guy, his name's Guy, who runs the British Pilgrimage Trust. We were discussing what the archetype of pilgrim is with the tarot cards. And he was saying he felt like it was the hermit, because you go in and you do this inner work, but you're also a bit like a confessional, and people will come and tell you their stuff, because they do. You're a stranger walking through. So everyone unloads all their stuff on you, which you need to learn to kind of process. But also it's the Fool, because you are stepping off the unknown, and you have to just enjoy everything and be happy wherever you are, because it might be raining and awful, but you're still going to have a good time. The more vulnerable and trusting you are of the universe, the more people respond positively to you. And it's our fears that stop us. So I used to imagine trying to go for a walk in my kith place where I grew up as a kid, that I would need to have a dog, or I didn't have a dog. So I'd imagine taking a dog lead with me so that I'd feel safe. And I was like, how can I possibly walk 500 miles on my own through the countryside and feel safe? I had a whistle in my pocket. I had a knife in my pocket. And you know, that was what I had to protect myself, but I didn't need it. Now, I'm not saying that nothing will ever happen. You know, there is danger in the world. There are things that can happen, but I've now walked the width of the country. Then I've walked from the bottom of the country to the top, from Isle of Wight to the top of Scotland, and then I've walked back across the country again. And not one bad thing's happened. Not one nasty thing has happened. People are so kind and generous, and they are from every walk of life. I've stayed with fox hunters. I've stayed with like complete, like absolutely off the wall hippies who are saying stuff that I'm like, well, even I'm like, okay, that's a lot. You know, Tory councillors, like ex-mayors, like so many different types of people who across the algorithms would be my enemy, who have just looked after me and have been kind and have looked after big groups of us, you know, up to 28 of us, and have fed us and kept us warm. And people love to care, and if you put yourself in a vulnerable situation, people look after you. The other thing is, especially with the Michael and Mary lines, so I walked this pilgrimage route. I just picked it for the length. Turned out that it was walking a ley line, which is a straight line drawn by a human through sacred sites, but then you dowse where that ley line is to search for the energy lines that are there. Initially they thought the people who found them thought there was just one, and they started dowsing, and then they realized there were two that were interweaving through the sacred sites that were node points where they crossed. And one they felt was masculine and one they felt was feminine, because the masculine line went through lots of churches called St. Michael, and the feminine went through lots of churches called St. Mary. Now I at first was using dowsing rods to find them, and I knew nothing about these things. Like, it was completely new to me when I set off. But I found quite quickly that I no longer needed to use the rods, that I could do the walk, and I could tell, first of all, it was the Mary energy that I tuned into. First of all, it was like an Instagram filter, just everything was tinkly and magical and just beautiful, fairy-like. And then I look on the map afterwards and realize I had walked exactly along the line, so my body was becoming a dowsing rod for these lights. What I eventually, by the time I got to Glastonbury and I was in the Chalice Wells Gardens and I sat in the two places where the two lines were, I realized the Michael energy was very much like a waterfall. It was all action and movement. And I realized that was making me, or helping me, feel really brave. And it felt like a hand on my back saying, you've got this. And it made me feel strong and give me courage. Mary energy was complete stillness by the well. If you sit by the Chalice Well, it's complete stillness, and it's not empty. It's like a mother watching something grow and making sure nothing disturbs it. So it's stillness, but it's holding. And I realized it felt like a hand on my heart saying, I've got you. And so that whole journey, I felt safe, I felt looked after, and I felt like my life transforming into what it has become was a gift from that walk. And it happened in Avebury. I went through a time portal or a dimension portal in Avebury. I suddenly was in a different reality. And I know that that was a gift from them. And then when we walked the north-south line, that was a different energy. I thought that maybe they'd be similar, completely different. That one was much more about what you're going to do in the world. And those energy lights were like the wrath of the feminine and the masculine kind of standing back going, oh. So there's this like, benevolent kind of sun-like Aslan, King Arthur kind of energy that was like, oh my God. And then the feminine was Ellen, and she was like Artemis, fury, anger, rape, murder. It was all of the fury of the feminine. And that felt like riding a dragon and was not gentle, but amazing. And it was like, what are you going to do in the world? How are you going to be of service?
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, that was quite a ride, actually. You know, I felt that I did ride with you through many different landscapes, actually. It's interesting that you close this part with this punchline about being of service, because this is how we started when I read that quote. And this is what I was feeling really strongly in the morning as well. And you said something else, that it was very powerful for me when you were describing the process of trusting people. At one point you said, people love to care. So what an important reminder, actually, you know, despite all the horrible things that we know happen in life, but what a beautiful and kind and important reminder that, yeah, human beings love to care, you know.
We like being of service. I think saying being of service is the key thing, because when you trust the universe and stop the fantasy is ego. And that's you trying to make and control the universe to fit some idea that you have of how you could be useful or fit in or play a role in this game that we're in, this play. When you surrender and trust, you discover how to be of service. And it's still using the tools that you've got. So I'm still doing theatre, I'm still being an artist, I'm still doing all those things they are my tools. But rather than trying to become an artist and trying to become a theatre person, instead I just am those things. And then how am I of service? Something far bigger that is forever showing me. I don't know, I'm just being led, and I'm just following the lead of what they're asking me to do.
Thank you. Yeah, there was something else that you said before that struck me, which is when you were describing actually the lane lines that you discovered and then you tested somewhat, then I understood that at one point you started to trust your body as a rod. It was the body was the compass, the body was the guidance. And I feel that in this life stage, you know, considering also the women who probably are listening to us, I feel that that is such an important muscle to train, which is also the muscle of self-trust and trust in one's intuition and trust in life, ultimately, because to step off the cliff in that way is just such an act of surrender and vulnerability at the same time. So
we have very little like language and dictionary for supporting that as well, because that is feminine, and that's the bit that's been quashed for so long. So it's what you would call witchcraft or witchery. All of the stuff is because it's not as understood in the masculine. The masculine is the thinking, it's up here. So we're all groomed from day dot as women to not trust that. And then you get to a certain point in your life, and I think especially giving birth and things like that, where you're like, this is not in the guidebooks. Like,
no,
this doesn't exist.
No. That is, yeah, that is another entire conversation about system of oppressions and what happened to our bodies and so on. I'm just aware that you have the possibility to check Facebook. I turned mine off. Can you see if somebody maybe is there asking questions, or we can take a moment for that? Or if there is any comment.
I think I need to update it so that it shows me.
Otherwise, we can also look at it once we close, and you can comment.
No, I can't see any comments.
Okay.
But if anyone has anything want to ask them.
Okay, good. So I'm aware that we are going to bring this to closure soon, but I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned once to me in our conversation that when you were in your pilgrimage, you also created performances or sacred theater, if I may say, out in the land. And can you share a little bit about that in a few words?
Yeah, again, that was about trusting that the story was trying to tell itself, and for us to just get out of the way and let it come through. And so when I was working and talking with the pilgrims, a lot of anxiety was there about, but what are we doing? How are we going to create this? And I was like, just trust it. Keep trusting. And what emerged was that we were holding ceremonies in each of the, what we felt like were the chakra points up the spine. So the line that we followed from south to north is called the spine of Albion. And we were actually walking to COP27, the UN Climate Change Conference, where we presented a performance. And so we had already planned that we would do a ceremony at each of the chakra points up the spine. And that was like a massage that we were giving to the land. And it was a loving act that we were giving. And we found quite quickly that we already felt that there was a way that these things were conducted that felt a bit exclusionary from people that weren't used to it, that weren't used to the kind of more esoteric world, but also people from more working class backgrounds as well. Like people, we had people in the pilgrimage that were barmaids from Chichester and kind of more just everyday type people who were like, it already has a slightly evangelical feel to it. Directions and whatever it is you're doing. And so we started to play around with that and to fool with it and disrupt ever so slightly. You're not in an irreverent way, but in a playful way. And when we actually did the performance, it ended up that we presented the 4 elements that we'd encountered on our pilgrimage. And we did it as kind of a blob of plasticine. So someone would say about the wind, and they'd lean really far forward and say how strong the wind was, and people would hold them. And it was as if they're leaning into the wind, and then someone would be flapping their coat. And we talk about trying to get through the wind, and then the earth and the water and the fire. And through doing that, it meant that the audience got a taste of the experience of walking, but also our relationships and what we heard from the words and what we heard from people. And what we learned from the water and the fire, and what we saw from how the land was being treated, and songs and poems had come to us, and they were all woven into it. So there was this magic ceremonial performance created that was hidden. It was hidden within it that's what it was. And it was improvised each time. So every time it was slightly different. It just came from what emotion leapt into us. So it was always very authentic. And we did quite a few performances. We performed in the green zone to the delegates, but we performed all around Glasgow and on the way up as we practiced, and each performance was different. So it was trusting again ourselves in our camaraderie and in the atmosphere of wherever we were to influence what we were doing.
Yeah, it sounds really magical, actually, and amazing. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of things that sometimes may happen also for instance, in a family constellation setting, when somebody volunteers or enters in the field on behalf of somebody else's field or family. And there is that element of trust in that each of us can actually channel that information, if we allow it, to reverberate in our body, if we allow that sensitivity to open up, if we can really listen and use our whole intelligence, which is so squashed often for people in daily life. So we're gonna...
There's an archetypal play going on in the background that's our ancestors and is the higher version of ourselves. And we are, you can't do fooling for long before you go, hang on a minute, this is a simulation or a play within a play, within a play, within a play. It keeps going back. And it's trusting that there's this higher version of you that you're representing on earth. And instead of being a puppet, you can become a priestess or a priest of it. And you actually are here in service of this higher thing. And then to observe how you play out with the other players around you, knowing that you're all one. And so you stop having this like me and them separation, but you see it all as a dance and as this kind of moving cauldron of magical soup that you're part of. And that all of that magic stuff, all of the inner world is part of it and is influencing it. And the more you let it through, the more sacred and incredible your life becomes, because it's not just the outer world, physical. There's so much more happening.
Yeah. That is one of those things that definitely have been forgotten in our society, because our ancestors, and today still in some other, community or traditional or tribal settings, dancing, singing, drumming, performing, and ritual, they're all one, and they're part of community life to also honor transitions or rite of passages in life, or to honor life and death and birth and marriages and divorces, and calling in prosperity and allowing the wisdom of the ancestors to come true. So there is something really important about rewiring this ancient technology and art in our life, because we need it to move forward in a way that is more respectful of the invisible world around us. The fact that we don't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. And we live in a world where everything is so, we have to touch everything, and we rely so much on sight that we forgot that there is something else that can open actually to receive that information. So I want to thank you really for reminding us.
There's the teaching of the Fool, because the Fool is the zero at the top of the tarot deck, and that's when our inner and outer are one, and that's how most Indigenous culture and our ancestors lived, and children are in that space where your inner and outer are one space. And when we're split, that's infinity, and that split is our ego. So we think there's an outer and we think there's an inner, but there's only one infinity. Your infinity is the same as mine, and the infinite inner world is the same as the infinite outer world. There's only one infinity. So when you've got that unsplit, you have the Fool, and the Fool is all the known and all the unknown, all in one space together.
Yeah. Maybe we can take some other time also for another interview to speak even a little bit more in depth about this archetype of the Fool. I feel that it's very important, and it's just coming to mind, in fact, that in ceremonies, probably the Fool also had a role, or in some other cultures, probably it would be called also the trickster, perhaps, and it would have a specific role even in a very important moment of a ceremony to disrupt certain things. So thank you so much. I know. So important to be able to look at the world upside down and with the eyes, of curiosity and wonder and the innocence of a child, perhaps, So I would love to talk to you maybe some other time. And thank you so much for today. We touched many things, and I'm moved by the depth of your journey and all that you shared. So before we go and ask you, how people can find you, and if there is anything in the pipeline that you're offering now, what would be, a piece of advice in few words that you would give to women who are struggling, considering that you spoke about many things, including also IVF and your own journey with, really embracing difficult things. What would you say to somebody who's struggling right now?
This too shall pass. And it's the oldest teaching there is, but it's true. And it's even true of when things are good. I know that there will be shifts where people will die and things will happen that will disrupt where I'm at now, and that's just a given. And the control thing makes it easier. So the more you try and relax into it, surrender and give up that control and go with the flow and the dance of the good and the bad and the ugly and the joy and all of the things, and dance with it, it will look after you. It's only got your back. It's all it wants is for you to reach your highest self. That's all anything it wants. And so trust it and trust the love that is there.
Thank you. I loved all the images actually that you offered, that came really to life also through your expressivity, because I feel that those are really supportive also just to open up the imagination, because what I'm feeling right now, it is also this invitation to open up the imagination. And so thank you so much again. And so can you tell us if there is anything that you're doing right now, if you're offering pilgrimages, and where people can find you?
So for the pilgrimage stuff, it's probably easiest to find us at Strolling Mamas. So that's on Instagram and on Facebook. And that's just to hearing about where we're going and what we're doing. There will be a pilgrimage again next autumn. We're going to come back down the spine of Albion, doing a King Arthur play. So we'll be looking to connect with people for that. And there is openings for people to join pilgrimages and new offerings that are opening up with that. And I'm writing a book at the moment of the story so far. So that's all being written down. So you can follow me at Kriya Arts, which I think is on the Facebook. And then I do moon ceremonies as well on the dark moon and full moon. On Facebook, there's a group called La Luna Coven. And if anyone wants to come to that, then we can hang out over Zoom on the full moon and dark moon, which I
Thank you. Thank you. So more to come in the future. Thank you so much. I'm gonna end the Zoom meeting for now. And thank you.
Joy,
Thank you for being here. Yeah.